Well, hello and welcome to the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint live series. My name is Guy Stevens. I am the founder, executive director, and the host for the podcast. Really excited to have you here today. We've got a fantastic show in store for you and excited to have you here. If you're not familiar with who we are and what we do, the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint was formed, just about 5 years ago now, and really started out of a personal experience with restraint and seclusion happening to my son, and began to do work to try to understand why these things were happening, who they were happening to, and ultimately what we could do differently. Our work is really about shaping changes in policy and practice to reduce and eliminate practices like restraint, seclusion, suspension, expulsion, corporal punishment, to create safer schools for students, teachers, and staff, and really ultimately to create better environments and better outcomes. So if you're not familiar with us, be sure to check out our website, which is endseclusion.org, and you can learn more about us and what we do. As I mentioned, we have a great show in store for you today. I've got Cass Griffin Bennett talking today a bit about AAC, or Augmented Alternative Communication. Really excited about that. Do want to share with you, before we get started here, some logistics. These shows, as always, are not only live, and they're live on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, X, somewhere else, I think, too. A lot of places. They are available live. We also make the recordings available off of the fact, so if you're not able to watch the whole thing right now, you can go back and you can watch the recording, and you can see that later. So know that you can always go back. We also make it available in an audio-only version as an audio podcast, and you can get that on Apple Music. You can get that on Spotify, or anywhere you happen to listen to podcasts. So you can do that. So before we get started, I want to share with you a little bit about some of the sponsors we have for our podcast, because we are fortunate enough to have some sponsors that are helping us to do this. Of course, it takes time, energy, and resources to be able to do this every other week podcast. And it is really beneficial that we've got some fantastic sponsors that have been helping us to do this. And let me start by introducing you to our first sponsor, who includes Robert and Ryan Delana. Robert and Ryan Delana wrote a book. They wrote a book called Without Restraint, and they are a father and son. And the book, Without Restraint, How Skiing Saved My Son's Life, is really all about a family's journey, a family that, much like others in our audience, experienced restraint and seclusion happening to their child. And Robert and Ryan, they came together and they wrote this fantastic book. Ryan now is in college and is an amazing skier. But let me read you a little bit from the inside cover here. As a child, Ryan Delana had difficulty controlling his emotional outbursts. This led to placement in therapeutic schools that relied on detrimental methods of behavioral modifications, such as physical restraints. Nothing helped, from therapy to heavy medication. Then, at age 9, Ryan was voluntarily committed to a mental hospital for further evaluation. His parents, Rob and Mary Beth, were counseled to place him in a group home. They refused. 2 years earlier, Rob had made an impulsive decision to take Ryan skiing and had discovered a different child than the version experts were so sure about. By his second day of skiing, Ryan was executing advanced runs, and with each achievement in the winters that followed, Rob began to question the path that was laid out for his son by professionals who were paid to help, but only judged him. He later convinced Mary Beth that they should fight the medical and educational complexes over Ryan's care and school placement, and together they fostered the freedom Ryan needed to pursue his dreams and become a professional ski mountaineer. It's a fantastic story, and again, it really is talking about, kind of a family's journey, that might be much like the journey that some of you are on. So thank you, Robert and Ryan, for being a sponsor for our podcast, and be sure to check out the book. And I've got a couple free copies to give away too. So if you're interested in a copy, and put something in the chat, maybe I can send you a copy. I want to introduce you to one other sponsor that we have for our program today, and then we'll get to our guest, who I see is now in the waiting room behind the scenes here, and we're excited to have Cass joining us here in a moment. But before I do, let me just share with you one more message from one of our sponsors, which is Supportable Solutions. Supportable Solutions is a fantastic company that's run by a friend and colleague, Connie Persick. And let me share with you a little information about one of the products that Connie offers through.
Behaviors are signals to the deeper whys. The Why Toolkit, a tool built for and approved by teachers, parents, and administrators that can both assess and support individuals struggling with behaviors. Connie has created a document that turns typical behavioral documents upside down and replaces them with a deep dive into what really matters: how to support each child within a compassionate and relational framework based on their individual differences. The Why Toolkit was found to decrease seclusion and restraint by 21% in a year-long pilot study.
And I thank Connie and Supportable Solutions for sponsoring the podcast, and thank also Ryan and Robert Delana for their sponsorship as well. And let's get on to why you are here today. I want to introduce to you our guest and talk to you a little bit more about what we're going to be talking about here today. So without any further information here, let me go ahead and bring Cass up on the screen here and say hello to Cass. Let me tell you a little bit about who Cass is. And I was actually reviewing what I had here as your intro, Cass, and I'm like, oh, there's so much more that needs to be added now. I think you sent this to us probably a while ago. Cass Griffin Bennett is an autistic and ADHD self-advocate and parent of multiple young autistic children. Cass is passionate about all things equity, early access to robust, high-tech, augmented, and alternative communication, AAC, anti-behaviorism and harm reduction. Her guiding goal in parenting is to raise her children to be their own best self-advocates. Cass has a career background in professional services, business development, and a degree in psychology from Smith College. And there's probably a whole list of things that we can add to this. I think when you presented at one point to the Alliance team, and I said, oh, Cass, you've got to come and present this for our bigger audience. And that's been a while ago since that happened. And now I see you presenting everywhere on lots of exciting topics. But Cass, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited to have you here.
Well, I am happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me and for waiting there for a second.
Oh, no worries at all. And we did get started a couple minutes late, but that's because life is always busy, and there's always lots of obligations. And so at any rate, we're really excited to have you here, and really excited to see your presentation. So I know that you have a presentation prepared for us. I just want to check with you. And before I do, those of you that are on live right now, I know there's a number of folks on live right now. If you're watching live right now, do me a favor, in the chat, let me know who you are and where you're from. It's always fun to see where people are joining us from. And of course, we tend to have people from all over the world that'll pop on. We've got people that'll join in from Australia or New Zealand or the UK or other places. A lot of folks from Canada and the United States. So it's always fun to see kind of who might be on right now. And I see you already have at least one fan that has joined in right away. And Jen is here, Jen Jewell, to say hello. And we'll have some other folks here, I'm sure, joining us in a minute to say hello as well. So I was going to ask you, do you prefer to take questions at the end, or would you rather take questions as we go? Because we can go either way, whatever you're more comfortable with,
Sure.
we will do.
So first off, I want to say it's a bit wild to be on the other side of it, right? I'm usually the one like commenting in lives as an attendee. So that's probably coloring my perception on my answer here, which is that I would love as much participation as we can sort of facilitate with the tech limitations that we have, right? So okay. My understanding is as soon as I'm sharing the screen, I won't be able to see anything, right?
That's right.
But if you
got it. Yeah. So that's what we'll do. I always like to give people a choice, because I know with my my presentation, sometimes if I'm thinking about talking for an hour, I will go down a rabbit hole and forget about my presentation. But what we'll do is we're going to bring your presentation up in a moment, and I will stick around I'm going to be muted, but if questions come up as you're going, and we'll welcome people to ask questions as Cass is presenting, I will try as best I can to interrupt you at a good point and ask any questions. And I may even interject a question of my own occasionally, if you don't mind. Great. So what we will do then is we are then set to take questions during the presentation. So feel free at any point, if you have a question, put it in the chat and we will try to get to it. And again, in the chat, let us know who you are and where you're from, and we'll get started here. So Cass, I'm going to go ahead and bring your screen up so it is available for everyone to see. And I now see your slide, and I see you, and I see me. And I'm going to be quiet now and just kind of disappear into the background and put myself on mute. But if you need anything, just let me know. And otherwise, I might occasionally pop in if there's a question, or pop in occasionally, even prompt people if they have questions, to put them in the chat.
And honestly, so you'll see these slides, and I have sort of a rough idea of how I'll go through the content. But at the same time, over the last year and some change, Guy, I think we've been part of a lot of the same conversations. So if there's things that come up for you that are like, oh, and that relates to this other thing that we talk about a lot, I very much welcome you sort of popping that in.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, I love the just kind of the general breadth of all the things that you're really passionate about. and I think you know that these are things that align really well with what we believe here at the Alliance. So I'm really excited about your presentation. So I will disappear and let you take it away.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. We're going to be talking about what Toddler AAC taught me about regulation and nervous system supports. So it's honestly going to be sort of me talking about various parts of my parenting journey and how it sort of led me to different realizations that I hadn't necessarily integrated. But it all sort of started because of the path that our journey, the journey that our family went down on Toddler AAC. So here we go. Who am I? I am autistic and ADHD. I'm a parent of multiple autistic kids. My guiding parenting goal is to raise my daughters to become their own best self advocates. And I put that at the beginning of the presentation because it, to me, is really important in thinking about the decisions that I make that you're about to see, and sort of why I'm making them, right? My just a mom disclaimer, which Guy has told me to stop saying, but I do want people to know that I am just a mom here. I'm not speaking as an SLP. You're going to hear a lot of talk about AAC. I know a lot of SLPs. They're great. I'm not one of them. Same for OT. I'm going to be talking about regulation. I'm not an OT. A lot of great friends are OTs. But this is sort of my lived experience as a mom, as an autistic person. And I'm speaking from that. I do have a bachelor's in psychology. And I serve now on the board of the Northwest Augmentative Communication Society, NWACS. I'm a volunteer for the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint. I am also a peer parent coach and mentor with Through to Thrive.
Cass, I just want to jump in real quick and say, I used to start almost every presentation I gave with, I'm just a dad.
Yeah.
And I don't do that as much anymore. And it's not because I'm still not just a dad. I mean, in many ways, I'm just a dad. One of the things that I love about that, though, that idea that I'm just a dad, I'm just a mom, is, to me, that is when people hear you today. And again, you say that, but you have this level of expertise that goes into a tremendous amount of depth, far beyond that of many experts that I've met. So, you know, don't let that fool you, I'm just a mom. But I think the hopeful part of that to me is, you know, when I think I'm just a dad, you know, you're just a mom, the hopeful part of that is like, and we can really influence change. And that's what you've done. So, you know, you may still say that I'm just a mom, but you're just a mom who's like turning the world upside down in ways that it needs to be turned. So
And
anyway,
I think a complementary idea to that is that as just a mom, right? Then I have a really I'm searching for like workable, practical, family oriented like solutions for my family, right?
hmm
So like oftentimes I think in the professional provider world, knowledge sets can be sort of siloed, right?
hmm
So OT knows what they know, neuropsych knows what they know, SLPs know what they know. And as parents, we're sitting there being like, I need all of this knowledge to be working together because I'm dealing with it all, right?
absolutely,
So
absolutely.
as just a mom, right, you sort of have the perspective of interacting with all those different systems and sort of taking the pieces from it, and trying to help your family's life better.
It's an important piece. I'll disappear. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I mean you're absolutely right. I mean that coordination part. Unfortunately, I've spent a lot of time recently in healthcare settings as I've had a mother who's been having a lot of health issues, and in that setting too, you realize that there's all these experts that look at this one piece of a person,
Hmm.
and so often people miss the whole picture. And without people, whether it's as a mom advocating or raising children that are able to have the importance of that advocacy, self-advocacy and advocating for our children is so critical because otherwise there's nobody that pulls it all together.
Right.
Yeah. All
Yep.
right. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. Good. So I am passionate about three things. I am passionate about Toddler AAC, and I will talk about that a little bit. I am passionate about AAC for nervous system support. I'll talk about that some. And I'm really passionate about supporting and empowering parents. And then I realized sort of over the last year, how related those passions are, right? So you'll see as I talk today, I think the ways that they are related. Um, One way is that there's sort of an underlying premise that access to communication is critical for felt safety and thus for regulation. And that touches all those things. The how is also a way they're related. The the way that I worked with my daughter to support her learning AAC as a toddler is using something called modeling without expectation. I have realized that the way that supports my daughter's learning regulation strategies is the same technique, right? And that's not something that I see talked about in professional worlds very much. But because the AAC part was such a huge part of my life, I looked at that and I was like, wait, why aren't we doing that around regulation, right? Why aren't we doing that too? So the how part, for sure related. And then as far as like supporting and empowering parents, um, this idea that how we can help ourselves, like the same things that help us help our kids in many, many ways, right? So we'll talk about that. First off, I want to say, what is AAC? This might be a new topic for some folks. AAC is augmentative and alternative communication. It refers to tools and strategies that can enhance speech or provide a completely different means of communication. AAC can be aided using a tool or unaided, no tool needed, such as sign language or gestures. The truth is we all use some form of AAC. We text, type, write, and use gestures. Additional tools such as communication devices, books, or apps can provide a means of communication for individuals who are unable to speak or for whom speech is not always their primary mode. So around our house, the grown-ups use a lot of AAC just by like, honestly, we give each other looks and we can exchange messages as parents just using our eyes, right? We text each other all the time. We, will send messages. Even like when I'm stressed out, when I'm dysregulated, it's hard for me to communicate using mouth words. It's one of the first things to go for me, is the ability to articulate really what I'm trying to convey. when I'm dysregulated. So finding other ways to communicate is really important, right? My youngest daughter is primarily non-speaking, and she has a robust high-tech AAC device, which is a speech generating device. So if you've seen tablets around that you see someone push a button on it and you hear speech output, that's an AAC device, a speech generating device. Also gestures and signs. And then we also have sort of light tech communication cards, one of which my 7-year-old fell absolutely in love with. And one side of it has how I feel, and the other side has what I need, right? And my older daughter is vocal, right? She speaks. She was in speech therapy for years, but she doesn't need AAC in the same way from a communication standpoint that my younger daughter does. However, when she's dysregulated, she can communicate using that way more quickly and easier than she can using her mouth, right? So, like me. So that's AAC. I always start with telling this story, and I'm going to give a big sort of caveat here, which is that this is the only story really about my younger daughter that is going to be in this presentation, because I don't present about her in ways that are recorded, right, for her future privacy. But here we are. So this was a random morning when she was 3. And I opened up her AAC device, and we were in the food folder. And I asked her, do you want eggs or cereal? And she pressed donut. And I said, haha, no donut. What would you like other than a donut? And she smirked. She navigated to the more expansive desserts folder, and she held down a button, which makes it plural. And the speech device said donuts. And I said, haha, 2 donuts. You're very clever. You can see the little screen there that when you make something plural in Proloquo to Go, it doubles the icon. So she was making herself 2 donuts. And then she started pressing every single dessert on that dessert page. So we had chocolate, pudding, cakes, brownie, popsicles, molten chocolate cake, pie. And when she got to pie, I said, you don't even like pie. And she smirked and she said, donuts again. And I posted that on Facebook because I thought it was just adorable. And I was just being a mom and sharing a story of what had happened, right? And over the next couple days, it started to hit me how much our lives had really changed. Because that would have been a very different interaction before AAC for us. So I come back, and on the right-hand side, you have my reflections. So I say, I think a major way AAC affects our life positively is that she can know for sure that we know what she wants, even if we don't give it to her. She isn't panicked, wondering how she's going to get her point across 24/7, and thus perpetually this close to the emotional regulation edge 24/7. That's not to say we don't have miscommunications. We absolutely do. And they stink, but it's not nearly as constant. And the cumulative effect of that decreased stress is really immense. Then I come back and say, and this is important, if I had been using PECs or another limited AAC situation, she'd have felt she had no way to tell me what she actually wanted, because I used the old parenting strategy of give them a choice between 2 options you're fine with, right? Parenting strategy. And she didn't want eggs or cereal. She didn't want those 2 options. Speaking kids get to say that. They get to push back. They get to say what they really want. Non-speaking kids want to be able to do the same, right? And if I had been putting together a PECS book for her, or communication book that just had a limited amount of options, as her mom, when I'm sitting there making that, here are the 2 choices I'm fine with, pick one, I can tell you I wouldn't have put a donut icon in that communication book, right? I wouldn't have. So she wouldn't have been able to tell me that she really wanted the donut. And that would have escalated, right? But with the tools allowing us to communicate more fully, we got to giggle together. Like she was joking with me, right? And that's high-tech AAC, and more specifically, that's robust high-tech AAC. Again, this is sort of a very shortened version of our journey, but my love language is memes, so there's going to be a few of these. I made this one. We were gatekept from robust high-tech AAC. Both our early intervention SLP and our private SLP said that she was not a good candidate because she would not do low-tech AAC. So for instance, she would not do exchanging a picture symbol for an item. She did not have joint attention skills that were what they wanted to see. So they said, it's not for her. And I said, okay, well, I guess you get to make that decision because you have all the power in this. I don't think that's correct because I think that there's a difference between a device that has voice output and my 2-year-old being able to interpret symbols on a paper, right? I just think there's a difference. But what do I know? I'm just a mom. So the good news is I decided to do it anyway. And I do want to share my why on why I decided it was important to do it anyway. And Guy has had Jordan Zimmerman on here before. And I highly recommend going back and watching her interview with Guy because it's wonderful. She came out with a documentary in late 2021 that we watched while the girls were both going through the diagnosis, the evaluation, and then eventual diagnosis process. So it was a really high emotional time, right? And I was very worried about my daughter's communication. And I want to show the trailer for anyone who hasn't seen it. If you need me, can you hear the word? No matter where you are.
When I first met Jordan, when I first looked at her, I thought, this young lady, she's broken.
When we decide who someone's going to be and we don't leave the door open at all, we can't, there's no room for change.
Once I began 9th grade, I was in and out of here until I turned 19. I did simple tasks and earned candy for complying.
I think that she is unusual, but I think that the things that she's done, all kids that are nonverbal can benefit from.
So that is only 56 minutes long, and it totally changed our lives because in its 56 minutes, you see how Jordan's education, she had really big behaviors, right? That were, it turns out, in significant portion caused by the ongoing lack of access to robust communication, right? And then those same behaviors were used as justification for why she couldn't have access to robust forms of communication. So she was sort of stuck in a loop, right? And she was the vulnerable child in this. And she didn't get access to robust communication until she was 18 and a half. So I'm sitting there and I'm watching this, and I could see it in my daughter, right? I could see the frustration that was there all the time at that age, because she was desperately trying to communicate, right? And so I saw that path, and it's why I got involved with the Alliance, actually. Around that time is when I really started following the Alliance, because I realized that for a lot of non-speaking or minimally speaking kids like my daughter, and like Jordan, honestly, the question of isolation and restraint sort of feels like a when, not an if, right? And that was devastating as a realization for me. And it was also, it lit a fire because it was like, what can I do now? Can I do anything now to sort of try to help prevent that? Do what I can, right? What can I do? And I thought, well, one thing I can do is somehow make this AAC thing happen so that at least school won't be able to gatekeep it from her. So that was my only expectation. When we finally did go through a process after she was diagnosed as autistic, we actually were able to have an AAC evaluation, but I was prepared to DIY it, because my only motivation at the time was I don't want it gatekept, right? I don't want to get into that cycle where her behaviors are being used as justification for keeping communication away from her, right? So it comes, and we are really excited, right? And I'm going against professional advice. So I have it in my head that I need a perfect plan, right? I need to not look silly to our providers who said it wasn't a good idea, who I'm still seeing every week, right? So I gotta do this right, right? The cool thing about that idea is that it fell apart very quickly, because you're living with a toddler, right? So she had her own plan, and she wanted to sit on our landing and see her little feet, and she used to eat up there, and she would press buttons over and over and over again. And you know, there's so much I could say about this part. And it's really hard to stop myself. But I'm going to skip ahead to say that the biggest effects we saw about Toddler AAC were around communication, around connection, both from a family bonding perspective, right? And then also like cognitive connections, right? Being able to build shared vocabulary around sensory experiences so that we could talk about, oh, that's sticky. I don't like it. Oh, that is gross, right? Like giving adjectives to be able to like provide each other information, right? So that she had other options than just screaming in frustration, right? But when we went into it, again, I only did it thinking I don't want it gate kept. So these things that happened were actually a giant surprise, because I went in being like, it's going to be a couple years before she actually uses this for communication, right? So I went in a super skeptic about the whole thing. And instead it fully changed our lives, and quite quickly. And I mean that in a, not immediate. She didn't take to it immediate, but I kind of looked up 6 months later and realized, wow, 6 months ago, I was having to protect my body from headbutts. I was having to protect her body all the time from frustration, that because she couldn't communicate, right? And so, and it's not to say that everything went to like rosy and easy, right? But her baseline regulation had changed dramatically, right? And that was the effect that I did not see coming. I could not have predicted that, and it still amazes me. The biggest effect was around regulation. Being able to use her device to prepare her for scenarios. We were already doing visuals, right? We were already doing pictures and all of that, but something about having the speech generating aspect combined made it, I think, more dynamic. And it was portable too, right? So it would go everywhere and I'd be able to tell her where we're going, prepare for transitions. And we had a problem solving device. We had a tool for the first time that wasn't just looking at each other and beseechingly begging each other to try harder, right? Because that's really all we had before was me trying to get her to try again in a way that wouldn't trigger her, right? When I didn't understand what she was trying to communicate. And then we got a tool, right? And so both of us could be on the same team and use a tool. And it just changed the dynamic in a way that made it a lot less interpersonally fraught, right? And I would even model like, oh, I can't find it. Like, and I would get mad at device, right? I would like let that energy go there, right? Rather than like at each other, right? So, and then the big one that we're going to talk about is the felt safety aspect. Why I think we saw just such a cross environment change in her ability to engage and stretch and take risks. So it has come with an animal journey.
Can I pop in with a quick question?
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious, and you may get to this, and if you do, you can tell me to wait. But so kind of listening to the journey so far, as you went from, I'm going to do this anyway, kind of against the advice that you were getting, but then began to see the potential and the progress. How did those same professionals respond as they had to be noting the change as well?
Ooh.
And I'm not trying to put anybody in the hot seat.
No,
I'm just kind of
nobody's asked
curious.
me that before.
Yeah,
Nobody's asked me that. So I'm
Okay.
trying to think, I'm like, how can I be very diplomatic? Honestly, it felt like it was just sort of ignored. Because that age is also very strange. In the US, you change from early intervention to school district services at age 3 in most places, right? The 3rd birthday is like a hard stop. So at the time all these things were happening, our early intervention team was winding down, right? So because it was the time when we were having school district evals and preparing her IEP and like doing all of that. So I think they had sort of just kind of stepped back a little bit from being engaged in sort of her journey around communication. I will say our private SLP has come a long way to my knowledge. And we don't work with her anymore. But she was an amazing SLP for our family. She just did not know much about AAC, right?
Right. And similarly, not much more so even at that age range, right? I mean, when I first started hearing you talk about this, I'm like, oh, because I had always, and again, not from personal experience, but the experiences that I heard were often people being discouraged from AAC. Well, if you do that, then they're never going to learn this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I would imagine even more so at that age. But I mean, you're out there on a mission and you're raising awareness and you're impacting some change. And I know you're doing that on a level. Even I know SLPs that you've talked to and collaborated with as well. Is there any more knowledge out there today in terms of like the academic world of people looking at this a little bit more, or is any of that changing?
I think it is changing. Yes.
Okay.
I do. Now, and a little bit later in the presentation, I'll talk about like me presenting to everyone, right? Everyone who will listen, I'm presenting to you. And how I have seen that, this time last year when I was talking to somebody, I was for sure the first person that had talked about toddlers using a device, right? Around them. I was absolutely the first time they had ever heard that. Now, that's no longer the case, almost always, which that's a big change, right?
Great.
Now, do they know much about it? Are they a little skeptical? Are they a little worried still about it? Yes, absolutely, right? But I'm no longer like the first time they're hearing about it, which I'll take it. And a lot of SLPs have done a lot of work putting out like myth busting around AAC. I think something that parents don't realize, because why would we, is that AAC has changed a lot in the last decade, even the last 5 years. The way that AAC evaluations are conducted, you start with low tech, right? You start with paper and symbols that are not tech related, because the cost on the tech options used to be huge. So even, 10 years ago, 7 years ago, and depending on your child's motor needs, right? Absolutely, there still could be further costs, but a huge portion of AAC for this age range is just an iPad. It's an iPad locked down in guided access mode with a good case on it and an AAC app.
A real good case.
But people don't know that, right? Yeah. Like parents don't know that. Some SLPs don't know that. And the SLP, the sort of acquisition process is still sort of gatekeeping as though those systems cost $10,000, right? So there's this idea of like with AAC, we need to start with the low cost options, but nobody's really adjusted very much in the industry to the fact that it doesn't cost as much anymore at all.
Sure. Why put an artificial barrier there? Listen, sorry, I didn't mean to take you down a side road. I'll let you get back to this, because this part about safety, I think, is so important. And you've been laying the foundation for this idea that, I mean, if we look at like the restraint and seclusion data, autistic children far more likely to be restrained and secluded, non-speaking autistic children, and just that communication, not having access, makes so much. So anyway, I'll be quiet again, I promise.
Yeah. So when I talked about this, I say on the left-hand side are two underlying assumptions, right, that undergird my premise. So you have to kind of go with me on the journey on these first two things on the left. My first assumption is that kids are intrinsically motivated to connect, to communicate. So you don't actually have to motivate that. Kids are already intrinsically motivated. The second thing is that our house operates on this model of child engagement by Greg Santucci, who is an OT, who's on Facebook, and I highly recommend everybody follow. So he has this little infographic, and if our goal is participation and engagement, right? And we're not getting that, we need to go back and look at regulation, right? Is the child regulated? Uh-oh. If the child isn't regulated, what do we need to do? We need to go back and look at trust and safety. Said another way, like connection and felt safety, right? Because safety, I think, by a lot of folks can be understood as this idea of, are they physically safe, right? And that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, like, do they feel safe? So my premise is that my experience with Harriet is that more reliable, robust communication leads to an increased felt safety internally, which leads to a more stable regulation foundation, which leads to more frequent ability to engage, participate, stretch, develop, and learn across environment. So there's a lot of implications to that, right? And in my Toddler AAC presentations that I give to other folks, I I show a lot of video from our journey, right? You see a little like 2-year-old child with AAC device. You see her sort of progress through, and I didn't do that here because of wanting to protect her privacy later. But I do want to quickly point folks to a few places, right, where you can connect with me around Toddler AAC if you want to explore that more. One big one is the NWACS Family AAC group on Facebook. So just search for Family AAC, hosted by NWACS. And then I want to point out NWACS also has a landing page for parents that has getting started with Family AAC, a handout like, so my kid just got a device, now what? We have for folks in Washington, which is where we're based, though we have folks involved from all over. We have a AAC provider directory. We have whole sections around AAC across the lifespan because it was our 2023 theme. And one of those whole sections there is AAC in birth to 3, AAC in the preschool population, AAC in school age. So if you're looking for those little age segmentations, there's tons of resources broken out that way. And there's also landing pages for providers and for educators as well. And then opportunities for connections. We have an annual conference in October, and we have 3 monthly events that are open to parents, open to everyone. And I'm at almost all of them. So if you want to connect with me about Toddler AAC, please feel free to join NWACS things and to find me. I have an upcoming presentation on May 18th that is open to everyone and has a QR code there. And it is going to be about Toddler AAC, and it's going to have all the videos, have all that stuff, right? So it's free, and if you would like to join, I would love to see you. So please feel free. Okay, so now I'm going to move to talking about our Toddler AAC journey. So Guy knows this, but I am deathly afraid of public speaking. And I had he was trying to get me to talk about this for quite some time. And I kept being like, absolutely not, never, no, thanks. But I had to put together a presentation about our journey for the special education director in our school district and the deputy director. And I had to do it specifically about my child and what we had done in the last year since they had seen her, because we decided not to put her in the first year of preschool that we could have. So when we were talking about putting her in for the second, I needed to meet with them to be like, here's what we've been doing with AAC, and here's how we've done it. Here's the, what we've seen doing it. So that, because I knew the way they were doing AAC is not the way we were doing AAC. Mm-hmm. And I needed it to be a safe place for her to land, right? So in doing that, I made a presentation that was going through all of my old Facebook posts and all my old videos in my phone, and put together sort of a year in retrospect of our AAC journey. And then a couple of weeks after that, I was asked to give a short presentation as part of This Is Not About Me screening. And because I had been the one saying, everybody needs to do watch parties for This Is Not About Me, it changed our lives. When they asked me to do that, I said, well, okay, because I felt obligated, right? And then Guy asked me to present to the volunteer team, the AASR volunteer team. And that was the first long presentation that I gave. So Guy pushed me, and thankfully he did, right? Because things had changed. I do this all the time now, right? So From
And it's
there,
incredibly important. I mean, it really is incredibly important. I'm so glad. I mean, I knew not long after talking to you and beginning to get to know the work that you were doing, like that this needed a megaphone, this needed to be heard, this needed to be in the world. And, sometimes the question is, if not us, then who? And sometimes there's not another who there. And I'm so glad that, again, it's about getting out of our comfort zone sometimes, and sometimes in a big way. But I'm
yeah,
thankful. I'm
yeah,
thankful. Every time I see your name popping up on things right now, I'm just so excited about it. And so anyway, I'm sorry, I'll be quiet again, but
thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. But B, for any parents listening, like, please know that, like, I didn't think this time last year that I would be in this position. In fact, I would have like given you $20 to never tell me that again, because I would have been so anxious at that very idea. Right. But the way things happened, it was all like, Guy asked me to do this. And then someone said, hey, well, do you think you could talk to this? Or I'm in a webinar that I'm at just for my kids, but I talk about how important Toddler AAC was for us, right? And then I get contacted from an SLP who's also attending saying, hey, would you talk to our early intervention team? Would you do that? And I'd say, yes, right? Because how can I say no to that? And then one led to another, led to another, led to another. So, now I'm frequently presenting to whole teams, whole agency early support staff about Toddler AAC. And then, frequently we will have like a drop-in or two after that fuller presentation, so that, as they start doing things, we can kind of troubleshoot and they can ask questions and I can give that, oh yeah, that's very familiar. Yep. And then everybody feels good about it. Deeper dives on the how, deeper dives on Gestalt language processing. I've guest lectured for SLP graduate courses to families at, different clinics, and different early intervention agencies. I presented to our state council that oversees early intervention supports 2 weeks ago. Last week, I presented to an early intervention agency's board of directors because they needed support in explaining why they were putting funding towards really supporting Toddler AAC. And they were like, oh, you know what? The mom, let's bring the mom in, right? So I did that, right? And it went really well, because it's when you see it in action, it's kind of hard to argue with. So basically, my big message is that there are no prerequisite skills for robust high-tech AAC, right? There is no perfect way to start. Start anyway and presume competence, right? And I realized that a huge thing that I was doing in all of these follow-ups and in my original messaging is demystifying, right? Because again, the way that AAC had been dealt with for decades had changed so much. And a lot of the SLPs had no idea. And they also felt a little like they should know, right? Because parents are asking them. So a little, maybe embarrassed about what they don't know, right? So I created these sort of safer spaces for them to be vulnerable and be like, but what about, the kid is just stimming on the device constantly, right? And my response to that is like, well, it turns out like my kid did that. Absolutely. Stims on the device all the time. Turns out she was practicing, and shortly thereafter began imitating, right? So be curious, right? Be curious, follow your kid's lead, experiment. There is no perfect way to start this, right? And that tends to be like the gist of the big message I give, right? Over and over again. so, and I do that as far as Gestalt language processing and AAC as well. So that demystifying angle has sort of transitioned also into this idea of regulation, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about my sort of thoughts I had starting out thinking about regulation, and how that has changed a little bit. So first of all, folks should know that I really love to read books. And so Not an Autism Mom has this great book list that is vetted by That Awesome Book Club. And it has 100-ish books on autism and neurodiversity. When my kids were on wait lists, I went through and like binged on the books that I could find. And they also put an asterisk beside autistic authors. And that was really important to me. So I was able to use that as sort of roadmap. So like I counted myself super lucky in that like Beyond Behaviors was like my favorite book, right? Like it was incredible. Sincerely Your Autistic Child. Ross Green, like I felt very good about sort of knowing what the advice is that was out there. And in fact, like, here's my memes again. Me and every parenting group, excuse me, had a chance to read Beyond Behaviors. So to get a little bit more like vulnerable about it though, I think the conversation around regulation for me as a parent was missing sort of what do I do in the moment, right? I was deep in it. I had 2 young kids. I'm autistic. They're autistic. Competing sensory needs is the water I swim in, right? And I got pretty good at masking my dysregulation. I got pretty good at suppressing my dysregulation when I needed to, right? But long term, that's not healthy, right? It doesn't actually, that's not good for me as the parent, right? And 2, it's not showing my kids sort of, it's not showing by example how they can start regulating themselves, right? I'm going to go back to this. A lot of the guidance that I was seeing at the time is a lot about co-regulation, right? That your most important role as a parent is co-regulation, right? And that the seeds of co-regulation and the safety they feel in co-regulation leads to self-regulation when they are developmentally ready. And I sort of, I don't know if it was just my autistic brain, right? But my autistic brain thought, so we take this meme, if we want self-regulated children, we have to consistently and repeatedly show them what that looks like. And I added those words, and how we do it, right? So I'm sitting there as a parent who actually doesn't really know how to talk about or self-regulate myself very well, right? How to regulate myself. I've gotten pretty good at like suppressing my trigger reactions when I'm dysregulated because I'm trying to be a good co-regulator for my kids, but I don't really know how to self-regulate. I don't know. I need support for that, for me, right? so that I can not co-escalate, right? So I end up, let's see here if this will play. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the big message, as far as I'm concerned, is that what was really missing for me during those hardest early intervention years was any support for my own nervous system. I knew how important co-regulation was. I knew it, right? I didn't need to be told that over and over again because I knew. And I actually felt really like a failure, right? Because I was being told self-care, self-care, self-care. And it's like, okay, but what's being tossed at me for self-care is either not realistic or doesn't have the in the moment help that I need, right? It doesn't, maybe going to get my nails done or whatever may come to mind, taking a nice bubble bath, maybe that helped me for a period of time, but it doesn't help me the next morning when I'm in sensory overload and have children attached to me, right? And I'm trying desperately not to lose my cool, right? So thinking more about experimenting and being curious with regulation tools for ourselves is one of the most meaningful things I think we can do as parents to support our own health and then to support our children learning those skills themselves.
I'm thinking of a future parent.
So, all right. So one thing about modeling, right, is that we're modeling things for kids all the time, whether we realize it or not, right? How we react, to how we live, how we parent, is showing our kids by example how to do that too, right? But we're weirdly tight-lipped around regulation, right? And for some of us, around our own regulation, right? And for some of us, it's because we don't actually know how. We're white knuckling. We're white knuckling our early parenting lives, right? Because maybe we weren't taught the skills, or maybe we were taught them, but we thought that maybe we outgrew needing to continue thinking about it. And what worked before has stopped working, and we don't have a clue what to do next, right? So, okay, all right. I had this idea. What if I could put visual cues around my house for me? Things that resonated to me around regulation, to support my own regulation so that I could better co-regulate with my kids, right? That's where it started. I was like, I'm desperate, right? I talk to people, Guy, and they're like, oh my gosh, you thought of this. This is amazing. How did you, you're just so incredible. And I'm like, guys, parents who have it all together don't create entirely novel systems of self-regulation for their home. Do you know what I mean? I did it because I needed it, right?
But wait a second. You came up with the realization that I think few come up with. What you've articulated here. I mean, I'm over here. My head's exploding because, what you're saying really makes it relates a lot to where my head has been around education, and where my head has been around education highly relates to parenting as well. So here it is. So I'm a bit older than you are, okay, mind you, but for many of us, we were not raised and taught about our brain and our body and our nervous system and dysregulation and what it looks like if we're, what happens if we were dysregulated, or how we might feel, or what we might do. We were raised in some cases and told to suck it up and get over it, right? So in some sense, we, as many of us as parents and many educators and others, we were raised in this world that there wasn't a lot of awareness, but we now have this information out there. We have this information about our brain and our nervous system, our body. And I think about, one of my heroes and yours, Mona Delahooke, and her book, Brain Body Parenting, right? We are at the place right now where there could be a major shift in how we raise and how we parent children and our own awareness about our brain and our nervous system and our response. But you were realizing this deficit that a lot of people don't realize. So I hear you and saying, well, the creation of this thing that you created came out of a very real need and a deficit in how so many of us have been raised. But we have, I say this a lot, like, it's that Maya Angelou quote, right? We know better, we do better. Like, we know better today. We know better how to raise kids. We know better how to raise human beings. We know better. But to give ourselves some grace to a degree, these weren't necessarily things that we were raised to understand and be aware of. So, I mean, I actually think your revelation, and I hear you saying like, well, I just, your revelation was pretty significant if you put it in that context of where we are.
I mean, it feels significant to me
Absolutely.
as an individual, right?
Yep,
Because
yep.
I'll tell you what, in creating this home system, I didn't want to create my own. I thought, surely there's got to be some sort of like household, like, self-regs. But I kept coming across all these resources that were like classroom based or all kid based, right? And I was like, no, I want this for me, right? I want this for me.
It's got to start with the adults, right? I mean, it's got to, we're not going to co-regulate if we don't have a nervous system that we understand and that we can, help when we're having,
So I wanted it for me primarily so I could be a better co-regulator, right? But then I also saw, holy heck, having these visuals around the house means we have conversations that we didn't otherwise have around regulation, right? My girls get to see me experimenting. They get to see me like talking about, like they may have seen me at the sink. They may have seen my hand in running water, right? That may have happened. Because this system is up in our house, right? And this is on one of my sheets because it's one of my go-tos. I love the underside of my wrist in cold running water is like so good for my nervous system. So they would see that happen, but they didn't have any understanding that it was me trying to regulate myself, right? But because I have now sort of built this system that shows different strategies, when they see me doing it, I am modeling without expectation regulation strategies without having to really explain that much in the moment when I'm dysregulated, right? So it's removing the burden from me when I'm dysregulated to have to like explain it in a way that like gets through and resonates for the kid, right? Because the fact that we have the system, it already sort of places it in context, right? They know I'm doing it because they've seen me do it before. It's on my little strip, right? Like they know what it's for, right? And then if the grownups in the house did it, then my, at the time, 6-year-old wanted hers. Why did only the grownups get to have it? Right? Mm-hmm. And so then she wanted visuals and the system here is everybody picks and chooses what they want on theirs. The ones that are not in use live in the basket that you see on the screen there or in my little picture window here. And they change out. Everybody kind of owns their own strips and they can change them out and try new things. And the cool thing is it promotes conversations that otherwise didn't happen, right? For instance, the other day, and it's not some sort of magic sauce, right? Like we still have meltdowns, we still have upset, right? But after part of the repair from those, part of the like talking after those is, gosh, is there anything I could have done, right, to support you better in the moment, right? Is there something I could have done? And during one of those, my 7-year-old said, you know what I ended up doing. And I said, what? And she said, draw. And I said, oh, would you like me to put the draw card on your strip so that if you're feeling a little like heightened, a little stressed out, that maybe seeing that there could like remind you of something that could help bring your body to where you want it to be? And she was like, yes. Right. And the next week she was getting escalated. Right. And I got to I very low key, right? Very like not demandy at all. Like took a couple of her cards and went to her with saying 0 words, right? And kind of pushed them a little closer to her in a like trying not to make eye contact, trying to give her space. And she grabbed this one and I brought her pad and paper and she drew and then we were done. Right? So like, to me, it's promoting this idea that learning our bodies is a lifelong journey. Mm-hmm. Learning what helps our bodies is something that nobody ever masters, right? Nobody's ever like, I figured that out and I am done, right? Because situations change, right? So what can work well in one environment, the circumstances can change such that I need something different, right? So our kids seeing us experiment with different strategies, even when they don't work, is super valuable, right? That's super valuable. And again, back to that sort of primary idea of I created this so that I could walk over and one of mine has, I need my coffee on it. And like in the morning, because when I would come down, the kids would be like, kids in the morning before your coffee, classic scenario, right? So I got to sort of just gesture in a joking way, right? Like I got to gesture in a joking way to the I need my coffee. And it became sort of shorthand for like, give me a second, come on. But in a joking, it sort of helped everything stay. I'm not thinking of the word. Stay calm is not the word I want to use because it was stay playful. Right. There we go. Right. Stay playful versus fraught. Right. And it just plays out in all kinds of ways. And I think they're also learning that different bodies need different things. Mm-hmm. Right. Which you think about classroom environments. Right. You think about kind of supporting kids as they work on social skills, right? The idea that all bodies need different things is a really important idea, right? That we kind of keep our little tool set and everybody's tool set is different, right? And we can't necessarily know what they need because we're not in their body, right? And this also supports that. Because we don't.
And it supports the fact that we all have needs, right? That we as an adult have a need. So I've got to ask you this next question, which is, so where can somebody buy your book and your cards?
Well,
because that's going to lead to a statement here. I mean, because if there's not a place, remember when I told you should present and you should present more. We need another name aside from Home System, but you've got something here that really is impactful. So anyway, I don't know if you have any blog posts or anything that go into this in more detail, but this is really amazing, and I think. But the bigger thought behind this all gets to regulation, and it gets to kind of the adult nervous system. And yeah, so I mean, this is really
Yeah.
fantastic.
I mean, so when I started posting this on Facebook, right? Like because that's how I just kind of share what I'm doing. I people kept asking me like, how can I do this? And so like I share my Canva cards with anyone who would like it, right? I have like a shareable link. It's a lot of work to do it yourself. I recently joined the Through to Thrive team, actually with that kind of in mind, honestly, because I keep getting asked that, like since I started talking about it, because when I started talking about this, I was talking about it in parent support groups,
Right.
because it comes up all the time. It comes up like, how do I help teach emotional regulation? How do I keep my cool when my kid is like doing insert whatever story, right? And my answer to both those things is this, right?
Right.
And to my knowledge, I don't see it anywhere, right? I don't see that idea anywhere, and so I really want to help get it out there. So stay tuned.
I want to have you back on to talk about that once it's
absolutely.
So let's put a mark in that put a
mark in that.
Yeah.
So like one big theme, if you think a kid could benefit from doing / using something, let them see you do it. Without expectation, they do anything. So think about that, how that applies to sensory tools, right? I don't know about anybody else, but I frequently hear from school that my child does not want to wear ear protectors or do whatever, right? Like whatever sensory tools may be available. And my constant refrain is, in order to feel comfortable and safe doing that, she needs to see trusted adults utilizing those same tools. So how can we support her in that? Right? Because that is really how it works, right? Expecting her to be the only kid doing something different is not realistic or fair, right? Like she needs to see trusted adults doing the same things. So now, when I'm popping up in every conversation in every parent group, if it's about AAC, I frequently hear they don't want to do it, right? Like, oh, my kid doesn't want to do it. And it can come down to maybe some strategies were used in the beginning that made the kid have to perform in order to get what they needed. Like, for instance, there's some strategies around AAC that if you know the kid wants a banana, you say, okay, show me on your device, show me on your talker, where's banana? And you don't get the banana until they perform, right? Eventually, what's going to happen there is that the kid is going to get really ticked off about having to do that and going to push away using the device, right? So instead, what you do is, oh, you want a banana. As you're getting the banana, you've got the banana, the kid knows you're not withholding the banana, you're unpeeling the banana, and then you say, oh, I got your banana. Here it is. Here's your banana. I hope it's yummy. And you're modeling language on the other side of it. So the kid's nervous system isn't jacked up thinking that you're going to not give them the banana, right? So like, modeling without expectation in the AAC world has emerged as a term to talk about doing it the second way, right? About language modeling that is just focusing on giving the kid a lot of language models, right? With regard to regulation, same thing, right? Me in every conversation about regulation skill development in every parent group. Excuse me, have you had a chance to dive into modeling without expectation? Because I truly believe it is so important. Okay, let's see. is it okay if I stop sharing and we can sort of keep, if we want to talk a few?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Whenever you want me to make the slide, there you go. You did it. Okay.
I did it.
I was going to make it go away. Yeah, I mean, I want to pause for a second and just invite those that might be watching live. If you have questions or you have comments, to put those in the chat. You've covered a tremendous amount of ground here, and I feel like we've brushed the surface. There's so much more to dive into here. I do want to just share that a number of the things that you've been saying as we've been going here, learning our bodies is a lifelong journey. Everybody's tool set's different. I was writing my own notes here as you were saying things as well. Be curious, follow your kid's lead. There's no perfect way to start this. Start anyway and presume competence. You've had a number of kind of fantastic things that you're sharing here. So let me let you, as you stop sharing, you are now out there and you're sharing this information. You're getting people aware. Like what's been the change over the last year as you've been doing this more? I mean, what are you seeing? Are you seeing more receptiveness? Are you seeing any positive signs?
So on the Toddler AAC front, yes, I'm seeing a lot of interest. I'm seeing a lot of now. I have seen some educators get excited, and some OTs who I happen to be friends with on Facebook, right? So they see me post about my home regulation system, and I mean, I really think like the idea of this being in homes, the idea of a classroom,
right.
That to me could be an incredible, like absolutely incredible. So if there's a teacher who is listening to this and is like inspired and interested and wants to have a conversation, I would love to talk to you. Because I am not a teacher, right? But I think that teachers modeling without expectation, the use of regulation strategies in a transparent way, right? And kids having the opportunity to sort of own their own space, own their own little like strip where they have 5 or 6 of their go-to that they can change out. They have authority over it, right? They're not being top down what those are.
Right.
And that's the other thing. My daughters gave input on what went on the strips, right? Not just what went on theirs, but I made cards that I didn't otherwise have based on their input, right? And so them having agency and autonomy over those items and getting to like engage in those conversations at school, I think could make classrooms a better environment, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the things that I've been working on as well, and is that idea of kind of bringing back this discussion we had earlier about starting with the adult. When we look at all the things that are done to kids in the name of behavior in classrooms around the country, whether it be restraint, seclusion, suspension, expulsion, corporal punishment, whether it be, clip charts or behavior tracking systems, or a lot of these things that we now know are not only ineffective, but they're leading to harm. If we begin with educators that actually begin to get the knowledge themselves about their brain and nervous system, and this all has to start with adults. This isn't about doing things to kids. It's about like, how do we begin to see kids differently? How do we see kids through the lens of neuroscience and trauma in the brain and on all of these things? But it really is.
And like, I think some people get a little bit threatened by that idea, or a little overwhelmed by that idea that it all starts with the adults.
Right.
Because I think to a certain extent, we all know that, right? We know that, yes, I know like how I am, my regulation status definitely influences everyone else. It's a big burden to carry, to be totally honest, right? I keep going back to the idea that like I made this system to support myself first and foremost. Right. So it has these other trickle down effects that I think are really great. Right. But the primary objective that has been met, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
that I am better supported in my environment.
Right.
So if there's somebody listening being like, this sounds great, but I don't have the time, I'm too stressed out, know that this system was made to lower that stress, right? Because I felt too stressed out, right? And then sort of had trickle down effects, right? That were also positive and work towards the same goals.
Yeah, and I love your idea about bringing this type of system into a classroom. And again, there's a lot of opportunity here. You ever been to Atlanta before?
It's been a long time.
Been a long time. So you've been there before. So, next year in Atlanta will be the Creating Trauma Sensitive Schools Conference. And I can imagine a fantastic presentation with you and an educator talking about how to implement a program like this in classrooms. I mean, this is how this work happens, like finding people and collaborating with people. And there's a lot of potential here. I would love to see this, this thread pulled on a little bit more. I think you could really do something with this. But, the base, kind of the base piece that's behind this, that is kind of the through line with the the discussion around AAC, it's this idea that that when people aren't able to communicate their needs and wants, and the stress that can lead to, and the difficulty there's so much of what we see outward in terms of the behavior that we see. And there's so much that's underneath it, right? So back to Mona and you handing out Mona's book, Beyond Behavior, and the behavior iceberg. There's so much underneath the surface. And until we really get underneath that surface and we really understand, some of these critical pieces that even as adults, I wasn't taught regulation skills, we have these expectations often that kids learn to self-regulate that aren't developmentally appropriate, that aren't probably appropriate for given, but when you're creating a system and you're modeling and you're, wow, there's a lot of potential here. So anyway, I don't mean to just kind of rattle on, but there is a lot of potential here. And Jen happens to agree with me that you should come to Atlanta next year and find an educator and present that. We're going to make this happen. This could be a thing.
Well, and I saw Jen say it could make classrooms better for all kids. All kids need tools.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. 1,000%. This is absolutely not something I'm thinking of as specific to special education environments at all.
Right.
I think this is an education system wide situation.
And to go further, it's not just kids. Because, and this goes with something I say a lot, and people hear me say a lot, but the same things that we can do to improve the outcomes for our kids will improve the outcomes for teachers and staff. And this is the kind of thing that we're talking about here when we're talking about something like this. That same change would actually make things better for teachers and staff as well.
Right. And there are a few links that I wanted to put that maybe Courtney did around like, that I showed the clip from that podcast, that video podcast. It's 28 minutes long though, and talks a lot more. So you see a lot more of the system.
Yeah.
So if anybody's interested in that, I could grab the link and put that in the comments.
That would be fantastic. And yeah, I'd like to share that as well. So we've covered a lot of ground, and of course we are getting kind of the end of our time here, but we have covered a lot of ground, and probably there's a lot more that we could talk about here. I think the work that you're doing around AAC is incredible, and I appreciate all that you're doing. And of course, just a mom, but when I think about Toddler AAC, you're the face and the name that comes to mind here, and the expertise that you have developed over this time is really, really impressive and meaningful. So I really appreciate all the work that you're doing there. And then, of course, you mentioned Jordan in the film. I know that you were on a mission at one point for everyone to see that film. And I agree with you. I mean, we'll reshare that on social media as well. But it really is a film that can change your perspective. And Jordan, I mean, I've had the opportunity to connect with Jordan on a few occasions in addition to the interview that we did. And in fact, I'm very excited because I realized yesterday that it looks like Jordan and I are going to be in the same place at the same time for an event later this year in Maryland, in Annapolis, Maryland. I noticed that Jordan is a keynote. I'm going to be speaking at this event. So I'm actually excited that I might meet Jordan in person, which is really exciting. But certainly want to encourage people to check that out. But the connection point here with regulation and then the work that you're doing around this is, I think, really important work. I look forward to seeing kind of what comes next and, what you're going to be working on next.
I did remember one other thing that I mentioned Through to Thrive, and one project that one of my colleagues there is a former preschool administrator, and is now frequently substitute teaching. And I've had some conversations with other substitutes lately and just been kind of amazed at how they're sort of dropped into the deep end.
Yep.
Without supports. And one thing that, or without this sounds, without sort of the education pieces around how to support the nervous system of the kids that they're working with, right? Which has a lot of trickle down effects.
Well, but that extends to our educators. I mean, that's not just our subs or our paraprofessionals. The higher ed system right now is not doing a great job at getting some of this content out to future educators.
One thing she and I have been talking about is creating some sort of substitute teacher behavior toolkit that could be around neuroscience-based behavior concepts, and also integrate that modeling without expectation understanding and a lot of things that we talk about in the Alliance, right? And I think that could possibly, if you reach the reach the substitutes, right? Then where did you find that resource? Then we start to sort of make our way into more and more classrooms, right? Because this again, to your point earlier, and Jen's point, these are things that will help all the kids, right? Not just the ones that have been labeled as having big behaviors or anything like that. It's for all of them. So.
Yeah. I mean, I happen to be a big proponent that, that this knowledge that you can have about your brain and about your nervous system and about this regulation, that it really can help you see behavior differently. And it begins with your own behavior. And then goes into the behavior of others. And when you see things differently, I mean, Stuart Shanker famously says, see a child differently, see a different child. It's absolutely true of anyone that when you see somebody through a different light, you see a very different person. And that gives you an opportunity to respond in a way that's different, in a way that often, rather than escalating or causing a situation to go in the wrong direction, can help you to really get things moving in a better direction.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up here, I want to give you an opportunity.
Thank you.
I absolutely thank you. I'm so glad we've had the chance to have this conversation. And I mean, it's been a while ago since we planned this. And I guess for better or for worse, we've got, I think we're booked for a year in advance at this point. So when we booked this, it was probably many, many, many months ago. But in the meantime, I see you everywhere, talking about a host of topics. And please share those with me if I don't see them, because sometimes I miss things. But I really appreciate all the work that you're doing around this and look forward to hearing what comes next. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to leave folks with, as you're wrapping up today?
Honestly, I think my wrap-up thought is, if any of this felt like something you want to talk about more, please reach out to me. Right? Because if you're wow, nobody's talking about this, that's my experience as well. And I would love to talk about this. So you can find me, I'm Cass Griffin Bennett on Facebook. I am on the Through to Thrive .org website. You can reach me that way. You can also reach me through the NWACS Family AAC group, or coming to any NWACS programs. But I really am delighted when people reach out who are also interested in sort of changing the narratives around some of these things that we have going on. So I would love to hear from you.
Fantastic. And when we change the narrative, we can change the world. I mean, maybe it seems overwhelming, but even just when you have a talk with one family and they do something different and they have a talk, I always want system change. I want things to change overnight, but it's not the way things work. But when we can begin to find like-minded people and get more people moving in a direction, we're making progress. So you can hang on for a second. We're going to say goodbye to everybody else, but you can hang on for 1 second, and I'll give you one final thank you as we end here today. I want to thank everybody that was on today and joined us for the live event. If you're watching after the fact, we do these for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons that we do these is really to share good ideas, share things that we can be doing instead, share ways to help make progress. And I encourage you in that vein, share these. If you're a parent, share these with, a favorite teacher or somebody that you've been working with. You're an educator, share it with other educators or your administrator. By sharing information like this, we can really have an impact. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you so much, Cass. This has been fantastic. And we will see everybody else again in another 2 weeks. Take care. Bye-bye.